Welcome everyone to the second to last of these sessions. We're going to handle today a little bit differently than we have the past. A couple things that have evolved over the course of these sessions. The first is that we've noticed that we've had new people just about every single week. I kind of assume that that's the same case this week, but if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and say hi in the chat. Let us know where you're from and whether or not this is the first session you've been involved in. This is also, like I just mentioned, our second to last session. So with the understanding that next week, we're going to ask each of you, either individually or as a group, if you're working as a group, to share a pathway that you've started or created. We're going to focus a little bit on that goal today. In just a second, Jessica Silverman from Harvard LabXchange is going to do a refresher on creating those pathways. Julie has some professional development work that she's going to do around the cognitive demand of task, one of those other key indicators that we're hoping you're all thinking about as you create your pathways. And then we're going to have some time, instead of breaking out into groups, where we're just discussing together, answering questions about how to create a high quality pathway. I do want to be clear that while we are expecting to kind of look in and delve in and see what you've created next week, nobody here is also expecting that to be absolutely perfect. If your pathway has some placeholders, if it has, here I need a video of X and that video is not there, that's okay. In fact, what we might end up seeing is that as you go through, some of the other folks on the call might have some ideas for how to fill in those blanks. So with all of that in mind, be thinking about those questions, be thinking about the things that you need to know or have answered in order to create that alpha or beta of a pathway by next week. But before we get to those questions, Jessica, how are you doing today?
Hello, great to be here with everyone.
Thank you. So as I mentioned, we're hoping that you might be willing to give us a little bit of a refresher. I know that it's been a while since we all looked at it, and I remember parts but not all, and we have some new people today as well on how to create a pathway, how to add both the existing content to the pathway, so search and add what's in the library, and also add outside resources to a pathway. So we're hoping you'll be able to share that with us.
Absolutely, happy to. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and I want to apologize in advance for my internet connection. So please let me know if I drop off. I think I just need permission to share my screen. There we go. Okay. So as a reminder, you do need to be logged into your LabXchange account in order to create content. So that's the first step, is just to make sure that you see yourself logged in the corner here. And this will allow you to use the browse button to go to your dashboard, which is where you can create your content. And when you click on the dashboard, the first thing you'll see is actually your content tab. So if you have content that you'd like to add to your pathway that does not exist yet on LabXchange, this is where you can add it. And so keep in mind that it's best to assemble your pathway once you've added all those individual pieces. But just like Jeremy said, if you realize that there's something that you wanted to add that you forgot, you can always add it later. That's fine. So you click on the add new content, and when you do that, you'll have a choice of adding different asset types that can be part of your pathway, or you can start building the pathway itself. So we'll click on this pathway, and that will bring you to the pathway editor. So here you can describe everything about your pathway. So this could be remote teaching. You can add a description, and then you can give some qualifying information about what it's going to be about, who it's appropriate for, how much background knowledge you should have in this topic, and then you can get started assembling your content. So as Jeremy mentioned, you can add content from our library. So here we are looking at the public library, and we can filter that. We can look for a particular subject area. We can look for a particular type of experience. And then, from this filtered list, you can choose whatever you'd like to add. You can also, it will remember what you have going if you want to filter and search a few times and kind of collect a number of materials. It will remember that for you, so we can add that. And then you can also add from your private dashboard. So this is content that you have created, that you have added. So for example, I could add in this simulation, and you'll see that it has this private icon. So this indicates that it's something that I've created. I can certainly share it. I can put it in my pathway, but it doesn't come from the public library. So I'm going to go ahead and add that as well. And you can adding as many pieces of content as you need. If you change your mind, you can always take something out. And you can also easily move things around. So I'll add a few more things to play with here. So you can just pick up, drag and drop in order to reorder, restructure your pathway. You can also add notes to your content, and you can even add individual learning objectives for each piece of content if you really want to hammer home why you've included it. You can add a note, something like, you know, before you watch this video, whatever it should say. And you can also play only a portion of the video if that is what's relevant for the audience. So we can change that too. Okay, and so this is how you'll assemble your pathway content. You'll add learning objectives here. You can choose from verbs related to Bloom's taxonomy, and then you can enter your learning objective, and that auto populates for you. And then you can add an image to your pathway as well, because as you've seen on LabXchange, all of the content has a picture associated with it just to help you get a quick idea of what it's about. And then you say agree, and you'll see this button that says publish privately. So that means that this is going to, again, go to your dashboard. You can share it with others by having them enrolled in your class, and you can share it with your class. Or you can also share this by giving someone the unique link that's created.
Hey, Sarah,
So
this is Jeremy really quick. I turned your video off. That wasn't accidental because you were kind of cutting in and out a little bit to reduce bandwidth a tiny bit, but you're still sharing. Okay.
Got it. Thanks. Okay. Great. So I think that's pretty much it in terms of the nuts and bolts of how to add content. The last thing I'll say is that we do have an article on the platform called Best Practices for Pathway Design. So if you're curious how we think about it and some of the principles that we use in order to guide our designs, we have provided this for you to think about. But of course, we encourage you to design your pathways in the way that makes the most sense for you and for your learners. So I will leave it there. Happy to answer any questions.
So Jessica, there are a couple questions in the chat, or a comment and a question. The comment from Rafik is that this looks similar to a Google Classroom setup. It does, which is a good thing. It really kind of steps you through the pieces that you need to add. Jessica, I know this is a thing that we've covered before, but we do have some new folks. Anjana Kapoor is asking, does it have content for middle and high school students? And what is the fee for use of this tool?
Great question. Well, let me start with the second part. There is absolutely no fee. You create an account just so that the system can remember you, so that you can create your content, but it's completely free. We're fortunate to have grant funding from the Amgen Foundation that allows us to offer this free of charge. And that will be true, by the way, after COVID as well. We're completely committed to that model. In terms of content for middle school and high school students, certainly we hope that you find things appropriate for high school students. I think there is also a lot there that is appropriate for middle school students. I would highlight some of our collaborators like Science IRL, Science Buddies. Those are some really great channels that offer some fun interactive content. Lifeology is another one. But I will just say that you do need to be 13 in order to create an account on the platform. You know, when it comes to using this in a middle school classroom, you'll want to use your judgment on that.
Perfect, thank you. And if other folks have questions, go ahead and ask those, and we'll try to get to all of them. Before we jump over to Julie and her lesson for today, I wanted to make sure to introduce Keisha Harding, who has been the project lead on this project. Keisha, anything to share with us before we jump into Julie?
Hey, yeah, I actually just put a comment in the chat box. So just a reminder of kind of the two tasks that we have for you for the next week. One, like Jeremy said, we'll be adding some more content and pathways. As a PLC, we want to share ideas. We are all in this learning process together, and we want to make LabXchange very user-friendly by the time we're ready to use it this coming school year. So please add that content, add those pathways. You'll add a link to those to your discussion board. And then Julie, myself, or someone from the Harvard team can load those as a pathway into your specific course. So that's one thing you'll see. I also put a link to a post survey. So if you could take that survey before next Thursday or by next Thursday, that would be honest. It's really about the usability of LabXchange. And the Harvard team is going to use that survey to understand some of their next steps in terms of, we do need more middle school content. So let's start putting that together. So that survey is going to be super helpful to the team. So those are the two kind of big tasks that we have for you over the next week. We do have videos available from our second PLC. We are recording this one. We unfortunately, we got part of the first one, but not any of the breakout groups. So I'm gonna get with our webinar tech to kind of see where we're at with the videos, so that if this is any of your first time, we can give you access to the first couple of PLCs. So we're trying to work that out, but you know, there's just some technical difficulties, but we will have some other resources for you to watch some of our other sessions as well. So.
There are a couple questions in the chat that were answered, but I want to call attention to them. The first is whether or not schools can sign up students, and the answer to that is yes. A thing to consider, just if it's not totally clicking, especially if you're new to this, is that the reason why students have to have accounts for private content is that Harvard has made, this program has made a commitment to ensuring that the content is of a high quality. Everything that we upload can't possibly go through that vetting process. So the things that individual users upload does not become available to everyone on the platform. It's only available to people who are, subscribed and logged in through, through that pathway or course. So that's why that's necessary. There's also, somebody asked how to create an account, and Jessica posted a link to a specific article that talks to you talks you through adding that. And finally, Jennifer Martin asked what the difference between the edX and LabX is. Jessica, correct me if I'm incorrect, but edX is a platform, and LabX is kind of this specific content that Harvard is creating and curating. Is that close?
Yeah, it is close. I'll say that we are built on the Open edX framework. So we are a little bit similar in that sense that we're both platforms, but as I just wrote, so edX focuses a little bit more on offering full courses, and sometimes those are for a fee. LabXchange is completely free, and we offer content available unbundled. So at the asset level, a single video, a single article that you can put in the order that works for you, and you can also mix in your own content as well. And we also have community features like your own private classes and mentoring that are a little bit different as well.
Perfect. So keep those questions coming. We're going to have some time at the end of our session today to continue to go through them. So I'll be keeping track, as will Keisha and Angie and Jessica. We may answer you in there, and if there's some really key questions, we may bring them up again. But for now, it's time to dig in with Julie into learning about the cognitive demand of task. What is it? How do we ensure it? And how do we use that concept to make our teaching and learning stronger? Julie?
Unmute there. Hello. Yeah, so we've been talking each week about an element of what we consider to be high quality STEM practices. And I just chose, oops, that's not what I want to do. Sorry. I have trouble multitasking on here. I focused on 4 different elements of what we think makes good STEM practices. And these are things we want to consider as we're designing for digital learning. I know that our team has learned a lot about the difference between doing high quality professional development and lessons in a one-on-one or a group environment in person versus doing this over the computer. Very different process. But we still want to make sure we're focusing on those elements that make it good STEM learning. And so the 4 pieces that I focused on for this PLC are, in the first session we talked about design thinking and the importance of using a design process when designing our digital learning environment, but also making sure students and teachers and anyone who's using what we're creating is also engaging in that design process. Last week we talked about inquiry practices. So, in a digital environment, it's easy to lose track of inquiry because we're doing a lot of a lecture, a lot of direct instruction, like I'm doing right now, which is not my typical mode. So how do we engage in inquiry while we're in this digital environment? And then, so today we're talking about cognitive demand of task, and next week will be on assessment practices. So cognitive demand of task, there's a definition here. Cognitive demand represents the type of thinking, level, depth of complexity of thought you expect students to engage in when completing a task. So how much of their brain are they using when they're doing this assignment? Is it just, are they just receiving information, or are they having to process and do something with it? And this is on a continuum. And so what we like to think about with cognitive demand is we really want to focus on tasks that we call low floor, high ceiling tasks. So these are tasks that anyone can access, anyone can start, regardless of their background knowledge. But there's also opportunities to take that task to a much higher level. And so I just pulled one example here of a task that I've done with teachers all over the world. And this one is, it's about Twinkie, the balloon popping dog. So Twinkie is this is a 3-act math task. If you're not familiar with that model, it's a really nice inquiry model for teaching mathematics. And I have a link there. And by the way, this presentation is already uploaded into our LabXchange course. And so you can access that, and I'll give you some more information on how to access that in just a few minutes. So Twinkie is he's a dog who is trying to break the world record for balloon popping. So there is such a thing. And so Twinkie, the question that we ask students, and I have done this task with teachers who taught elementary, first grade, all the way through high school. And so the task is that you watch a little bit of this video and you watch Twinkie popping these balloons here. And the question is, will he beat the world record of 41.67 seconds to pop 50 balloons? Or I'm sorry, 100 balloons. And so you show students this video and it stops right here. And so you see that Twinkie is there and he's popped 25 balloons in 5 seconds. And so you ask the students, what do you think that he's going to beat the world record? And there's many, many different ways to approach this task. So a lot of times, first graders might end up just doing some estimations. They might say, well, he popped this many in this amount of time, so maybe, maybe they can, and they may have actually even count the balloons one at a time. Sometimes they draw diagrams and pictures where they're Xing off the balloons. But then I've had high school students design algorithms and design logarithmic functions to make that prediction. And what's also cool about this task is that there's a real world element to it as well. So even if in a perfect mathematical modeling situation, we can predict that yes, he will beat the world record, we also have the chance to talk about, well, what are those outside factors that may affect whether he ends up being able to complete this task? And so, students can be creative as well, thinking about, well, maybe he gets tired and he gets slower as he goes, or maybe he gets distracted by somebody in the audience. And so those are things that allow students to access it even at any level of thinking. again, I have the link to this here. So if you're interested in seeing if Twinkie did end up winning the world record, you can check that out later. So like I said, it's a continuum of cognitive demand of tasks. So, and I also want to make sure that I point out too that cognitive demand is, it's not that lower cognitive demand is bad and higher cognitive demand is good, because there are times when you need to just do that rote learning. It's not one or the other. What we really want to see in classrooms is a mix of these different levels of cognitive demand. We want to, if we're observing classrooms over time, we want to see that some tasks are lower and some tasks are higher. What we typically find though, and saying this with years of experience going to classrooms, is that many classrooms focus 90% of their time on the middle to lower cognitive demand tasks. And so that's why I'm focusing a little bit more on this higher level. And so I just gave some examples here of what would be a lower cognitive demand and what would be a higher cognitive demand. So if you look at like the second one there, students playing a computer game where they're matching the elements to their locations in a periodic table, there's a time and a place for that. But the higher level is where they're using the characteristics of the periodic table to make predictions for an unknown element. That's really why we learn the periodic table. We don't learn the periodic table just to memorize where we're going to find helium. We do it because we're trying to find those characteristics and make predictions. So anyway, you can look through that. I'm not going to read through all of those, but these are just a few examples that I personally observed in classrooms. And then I have something that I helped create. It's a matrix for cognitive demand in classrooms based on subject areas. So this is an example of we put together for science, but there are, I have a document that has one for English language arts and math and social studies as well. And this is a link to this is also in our course, our STEM pedagogy LabXchange course. So you can access this. But from left to right, we're going from lower cognitive demand to higher cognitive demand. And again, it's not a this is bad and this is good sort of thing. It's about, we want to see a variety of different levels of engagement in classrooms over time.
Can I chime in for 1 second, Julie?
Yes.
Because remember, Jessica at the beginning showed you guys how to put your learning objectives into the platform, and they already have the Bloom's taxonomy in there for you, which is exactly what Julie is talking about. It's just another word, but a lot of these descriptions that you'll see to infer, to organize, all of those things, I'm going to assume, based on what Jessica showed us, that they're also in there when you add your learning objectives. So this is a great tool to understand those levels and to have that match directly with what's offered on the platform.
Yep. All right, and so that's the end of that. So I was just going to add, as we're thinking about designing for digital learning, how can we make sure that we're also including this variety of cognitive demand levels? How can we make sure that it's not all just rote memorization and regurgitation? How can we make sure that we're giving students tasks that are the low floor, high ceiling, where anyone can enter the task, but it's unlimited what they can do once they enter that task. And that is that. So I think from here, we're going to pass it back to Jeremy. And if anyone, I think we have some questions maybe in the chat, and if there's any questions about cognitive demand or anything that we've talked about, design thinking or inquiry over the past few weeks, we can discuss that as well. So Jeremy, I'll toss it back to you if Jeremy's there. I know he was having some computer problems.
Jeremy's here. I was
okay.
I left you all for a little bit. My computer is slowly dying. So, we do have a one question here from just a couple minutes ago where John is asking if we can sort of demo exactly what you were just talking about, but in that platform. And I'm wondering if maybe Jessica could pull up her screen. We'll see if it happens. I'm going to stop your video again, Jessica, just in case. While Julie perhaps kind of talks through what that might look like. Stop Jessica's video, so hopefully we can see her screen share. Here comes that.
And let's make sure to hit on showing how you embed a link, because that was also one of the questions that he has. So I'd like for everyone to be able to see that.
Sure, yeah. So the suggestion that I had for embedding a link is to create a text asset. And so you can then create this just like you would your pathway. You can enter a title. You can put a little description. This text will take you to da, 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 da. And depending on how much context you want to provide, you can add a description here or an explanation of the resource that you're sending them to, or perhaps it's an assignment, so you can add all of that here. And then you can just say, here is the website to visit, or whatever you want to do. And then you can add the link this way. So that's one way to take people off the platform to visit something else. You can actually also put these links in the description as well. So if the link is something related to, tangentially related to something else, you can also just pop it in here. So those are a couple of suggestions.
Perfect, thank you. Julie, what do you think, if you were building a pathway, what would you want to make sure to keep in mind when we're talking about cognitive demand, specifically to kind of that form as we build it? How would that translate to you?
So when I've done a lot of digital learning with students in the past, I find that a lot of times digital learning really is equated. It's the same thing as an online worksheet. And so we want to make sure that the tasks that we're giving students require students to think and to process. And so here one example might be, somebody in the chat was mentioning Khan Academy videos. And yes, I agree. Students can get really bored really quickly with Khan Academy videos. But why are they getting bored? Why are they not engaged? Why is that not high cognitive? Just because you're showing a student a video on how to do a calculus, method, that doesn't mean that they're engaged. They're personally engaging intellectually in high cognitive demand. So how do we make sure they are engaging? So one thing we can do is make sure that anything we have that seems like it's just given to students, that we're also giving students something to engage with the material with. So graphic organizers are a great tool to use when students are watching videos. So I would never assign a student just to go watch this Khan Academy video. I would make sure that I had some sort of graphic organizer, something where I know that they're having to pause and think and process while they're doing this activity. Same with any text. So I'm a big fan of what we call close reading on text. And so shorter texts that students have to read multiple times, and they're reading it for multiple purposes. So they read it first for just to get an overview summary of what it's going to be about. They read it a second time, and they're maybe highlighting or picking out different pieces or main ideas or whatever it is that you want them to look for. And then they read it a third time to perhaps make a judgment or make an argument about something in the text. So they're having to take that and do something with it. So those are just a couple of examples. I know Keisha may have some other ones. She's got a big background in special education. And so she's had to do a lot of modifications with this kind of stuff too.
Perfect.
And sorry, you may hear my baby upstairs. I hear him. I don't know what's going on up there, but a couple of suggestions I have is always link things with something tangible. If your district has the resources, or if you have the resource to maybe send home a kit along with whatever virtual experience you're providing your student on LabXchange, that's an easy interactive way to get them to do something. There's also the mentor function that we've talked about in some of our last PLCs, where you can create a catalog of your own mentors from your community, and you can engage them on the website too, so that kids have another adult to go to if they want to discuss something or be shown something. Those mentors can give them videos and experiences. I would say think too about the structure of your school. If you guys are educators and maybe less mentors and counselors, are you going to be in school full time? Are you guys doing a hybrid model, or are you doing full on distance learning? Once you kind of understand what your school is doing and what your context is, then you can analyze the resources that you have to be able to link it with what's happening on LabXchange. So, and I would link it to a lot of the simulations, but like Julie said, the more you can attach a hands-on way of doing something with the computer, you're going to be better off, even if that is a simple graphic organizer that they're following along with. But if there are resources, because I'm hearing this from a lot of parents, like they wanted us to watch a video about a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. Well, you can only see so much on a video. So as a parent, I went out and bought it so that my kid could do it at home. So figure out ways that you can link a tangible kit or something inexpensive with the learning content that you're presenting on the platform.
I will add to that too, though the one caveat I always say is I agree 100%. However, we also always have to keep in mind, especially with the state of the world in education right now, that sometimes video assets are the best we can do. I hate it. You hate it. We all hate it. But sometimes it's better than nothing at all.
That's what we've got.
So while we always want to strive towards those hands-on experiences, we have situations, we have inequity situations where schools don't have the funding. Do we need to address the funding in those schools? 100%. But we can't wait to address the funding in those schools to give kids as many opportunities as we can give them. So I think that's an important thing for us all to be thinking about, is that kids learn differently, situations are different, and we just need to try different things in order to get the best possible experience.
I agree, Jeremy. Can I chime in one second? I 100% agree with Jeremy. And if that's your situation where it's like, well, my district doesn't have a plan yet, or we don't have a lot of those resources yet, be creative. Could you do a virtual philosophical chairs with your students based on some of the content? You know, what are some of the ways that you can get students talking and discussing and doing things together? And that hits on some of those higher Bloom level things, right? Not just memorizing, but can I apply, can I create? Can your kids take what they're doing on LabXchange, have a philosophical chairs discussion, and come up with a class initiative that you are doing based on what you're talking about on LabXchange? Just use whatever resources you have and be super creative. And if there's things that you want to bounce ideas off of, please put it in the chat, email us. We would love to help you come up with ideas, no matter what level of resources that you have. Because Jeremy makes a great point. We all don't have the extra, so.
All right, so with the time that we have left, there are still some questions filtering in that I'd like to get to, but there are a couple that were a few minutes ago that I think might be worthwhile, Jessica, of you sharing your screen yet again. What I'm hoping you can share is in relation to both Jennifer and John's questions. So they were asking, you know, okay, we see how to create that resource. How do we add it to a pathway? How do we make that pathway available? And how do we see that pathway as a student? How do we see it the way our students will see it? I'm hoping that maybe you could kind of walk us through and demo those, because I think that's probably useful information as people really dig into getting these ready for next week.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to help with that. So we'll go back to the dashboard here. So all of the content that you create is in your dashboard, including any pathways that you've created. And so as you're, adding content and adding, as you're adding content here to get ready for your pathways, it all lives here. And then once you're ready to add that pathway, I think we were doing that over here. Yep. So you can just click the add content button, and sorry, I pulled up tabs so my internet doesn't die here, but just as a reminder, we clicked on add content, we selected pathway, and then we were building that over here. This is the building view. So we'll click add content, and the first tab is anything in the public library, but this second tab is your content. So once you've published that text asset or whatever it is that includes links or includes anything that you want to provide, that is all here, and you can filter your own content just like you can the library. So if you know you made a text, you can go find that, and then you can add that specifically to your pathway. And so that's how to add your own content here. And then you'll go ahead and publish this. And again, once you publish, this pathway is now also in your dashboard. So another part of your dashboard allows you to, I'll go back here. Another part of your dashboard allows you to see your classes. So this is one way that you can assign content to students. And I'll show you how to see what they're seeing. So we'll take a look at one of my classes. So the first tab here is going to be the content that is part of my class. And I'm going to see it in the educator view, but there's a button here that you can click in order to see the learner view. So as an educator, I have the ability to add content. I can add it from the public library, or if I want to add that pathway that I just created, I can go to the My Content tab, and I can add it from there. And my sincere apologies that it's not loading, but I hope the idea is clear. So you'll see your content, and then you can filter for pathways. And you can add that here, and then it will show up in the unposted content. And then once you're ready to put that out to students, you just hit the plus, and it will come here where your students are able to see it. So if you want to verify that you've posted something correctly, or you want to see what your students are seeing, you can click that learner view. And now I only see that public content. And you can take that one step further. Let's just pretend that this is the pathway that I just built, build an online research community. So now I can click on this, and again, I'll see exactly what my students would see. And I should just clarify, even though we're accessing this pathway from our class, this is exactly what students would see even if I just sent them this link. So you don't necessarily have to go through a class to see this pathway. So then if I click on the Start Pathway button, it will start taking me through all of the different content in the pathway, just as my students will see it. So my students will see the description, they'll see the asset once it loads, and then they can advance to the next one this way. And if there are any notes that I've left, my students will see those here as well. So I hope that addresses the questions, but please let me know if I can cover anything else.
Perfect. Thank you, Jessica.
For you to, since you're on there, because I see that you also said, and I think this is super important to keeping students engaged, and also those higher Bloom level applications. You said students can create content pathways as a way to demonstrate understanding. I think that's really important. If I'm a teacher, how do I have my students do that and share with the class?
Yeah, great questions. So first of all, your students can also go to their dashboard. So I'm an educator, so this is the first one I see, but I also have a learner dashboard. So I can, and your students have a learner dashboard. So they also have the ability to add content, and they can add all of the same things that you can, and they can also add pathways. So I'm a big advocate for students, creating pathways to demonstrate their processes, their group work. How did they arrive at these different, questions? Or now that you've looked at a particular theme, what's a pathway that they can create that demonstrates their take on that theme and those connections? I think the notes that they choose to include as they annotate their pathway can also be very impactful. So I would encourage you to have students think about all of these tools as abilities for them to express themselves and share their perspectives. And then once they've created that content, again, it lives here in their dashboard, and each piece has its own unique URL. So if they're in a class, what I would recommend is, sorry, this is going to take probably too long to load, but in your class, there is a discussion forum as well. So you can encourage, you could even post a thread that says, hey, everyone drop your, pathway links here, and then everyone can share their pathways, and you can have students look at each other's pathways and provide commentary here as well.
Jessica, Jennifer Martin's asking if there's an educator dashboard where you can kind of see where everybody is.
Yes, so within the class, I'm back in my educator view here in my class, so I can see the content. I can also see all of the learners in my class, and if anyone has requested to join, I can see that here and I can approve them. Very soon we're gonna be turning on these additional features so that you can message everyone in your class individually. You can also assign them individual content. So if you wanted to create a pathway just for one individual, you could do that and assign it here, and you could immediately look at the individual's progress, or you can also go over to the progress tab and you'll see your whole class there at once. So that's how you can sort of keep tabs on you know, what everybody is accessing and how they're doing.
Jessica, I'm pretty impressed that the vice president of the Amgen Foundation is in your class.
Can I clarify too? Because I think she was actually asking.
Yes, well, he didn't.
Sorry, I think she was actually asking, when the kids are doing this, are they doing it from learner view or educator view? Because she says, do they have to have an educator dashboard? Your students don't have an educator dashboard, so they do that from the learner view, right?
Yeah, so with the dashboard, there's flexibility here because sometimes as educators, we're also learners.
Right.
And we believe that sometimes, you know, our learners can be educators. The educator piece, I believe, is only available if you enter a birthday that says that you're 18 or older. So for high school students, they should really just have learner accounts. So this is all they will see here is learner dashboard. For you, you will see educator and learner. Please ignore all of my gazillions of other dashboards, but you should see educator and learner here available to you. And so when you want to join a colleague's class or something like that, you'll be in your learner dashboard, and that's where your students will join your class and create their content as well.
But as a learner, they can still create pathways.
That's what she's asking.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, learners can create.
Okay.
Yes, learners can create content, including pathways.
There's our dashboard.
All right.
I think I got it.
We got it. We all got it. I'm not sure I didn't even get the question. So, so I hope I get the answer now. Jessica, one more question for you, and then I want to go over to Julie for a couple things. Jennifer Gentry is asking if there's a disadvantage to putting information with links in as a PDF as opposed to recreating all of the text in the content.
I think it's really a personal preference. I think we try to keep as much on the platform as possible because it keeps the experience cohesive and in one place. The more you send students off to other resources, the less likely it is that they may come back to the central lesson, or they might get a little lost. So, you know, I would advocate for maybe including something in your pathway if you can. But if you don't want to recreate it, or you don't have the time, or it's not necessary, you know, you can certainly link out as well.
I'd like to add something to that as well. I'm sure everybody here has had the experience of opening up an email on your phone, and in that email is a PDF, and you need to read it, but you're away from your computer and you're like pinching and zooming around trying to read that PDF. Students of poverty overwhelmingly interact with the internet through their phones, and PDFs and cell phones don't super mix. They have their place, but personally, and the tool allows you to do whatever you want, and you may certainly have reasons that supersede my reasoning, but I'd be really cautious about anything that doesn't render clearly and easily read on a phone when we're talking about interacting with students. So just a thing to consider from that perspective. Julie, I know that you wanted to share a couple things about the classes. Prior to you doing that, though, I was hoping that you could answer this question from Anjana Kapoor, because I think it's more of a pedagogical and content creation question than a question with the tool. She's saying, if we're generating our lesson plans and creating our lesson, how do we make them easier for students and their parents to be able to understand the content? What do we need to be thinking about You know, especially when we're talking about remote learning, and we can't see faces, we can't do those kind of just-in-time drop-ins. We have parents teaching who maybe haven't touched this content in 25 years, if ever. What do we need to do to make sure that the content is learnable?
Yeah, I think that's a really, you know, we can't take our teacher lesson plans that are have a lot of education ease and then expect parents to be able to understand and teach it. So I think we have to start looking at those instructions in much more of a, almost like an IKEA guide to putting together furniture. We've got to make it step by step by step so that, you know, parents can follow, do this first, then this, then this. And I don't know, Keisha, do you have anything to add on that?
Totally responding to someone in the chat.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Hear what was just said.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm sorry, guys.
That's right. Lesson planning. How do we make lesson planning accessible to our lesson plans? You know, as parents are, you know, teaching kids. I know you've been involved with that a lot over the past couple of months. How do we make parents? How do we help parents teach their students?
That's good. I think one of the biggest things I've learned, especially transitioning to the kind of this virtual understanding, is parents aren't teachers, right? As a teacher, I want to know every single detail. I want to know the standards, 5 different guides of questions that I could ask. My lesson plans end up being super detailed. Babe, 1 second, please. End up being super detailed, and it makes sense for us, but for a parent, I want things to just be basic. What is it that I'm doing? What are a couple of steps? What are even just a couple of question stems that I have? Like no more than even a page. So try and simplify as much as you can some of the language. I think using that Bloom's table or the cognitive demand table that Julie showed us in the beginning. I'm sorry about my child. NJ, please. If you use some of those sentence stems, some of those stems to talk about the task that you're looking for, that's helpful. But my biggest thing is parents aren't looking at lesson plans the way a teacher is, in terms of all the extra detail and what data you're looking for and all of that. Just what are we doing? What are a couple of steps to get there? What's the desired outcome? What are some questions to help me along the way, or at least some stems? And keep it simple, okay? Keep it simple, because you as a teacher will be able to assess the outcomes from your lens. When a student gives you that product, even though a parent didn't have that detail, you as a teacher have that detail as you're assessing. So it is okay if what you give your parents isn't as detailed or as complex as what we normally would have in our lesson plans. I hope that's helpful.
No, that's great. There's a lot of discussion in the chat box right now about creating pathways for parents. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And maybe that's where some of you want to focus your energy between now and next week, is thinking, you know, how do we design a pathway for parents?
To deliver. That is great.
I love it. Yeah, I think that's great. I did want to talk about, so there are some questions here about courses. So I want to take a minute and show you, for those people who are new and haven't joined the course that is related to this PLC that we're doing now, I just wanted to share what's out there and what you need to do to get access. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so this is my Educator Dashboard. And so these are right in here. This is my content. So these are things I've already loaded into my content that I can add to my courses. So now I'm going to go to my classes here, and you should have, if you haven't yet, you can now. You should join this class, Designing Virtual Learning Using STEM Pedagogy and Practices. So this is the class code. And Jessica, if you wouldn't mind taking a second and sharing all these class codes for this and in the breakout PLCs down here, if you would share those class codes in the chat box so people can join if they haven't already. So when you join, I have to, and I'll just show you how this works actually. So I click here and I want to add learners to my class. So some of you, so here's Jennifer. All right, she's asked to enroll in my class. So I'm going to say yes, she can join my class. So now Jennifer is in my class. Okay, so going back to my class here. So in this class, I have the STEM pedagogy and practices, which is the content on design thinking, inquiry practices, cognitive demand, everything we've been talking about at the beginning of our sessions. And then I just have some additional resources that we've pulled in here. So I'm going to click on this. This is a pathway. And this is where you're going to have access to all the presentations that I've given over the past few weeks, and along with some additional resources. So again, design thinking, engineering design process, inquiry practices presentation. So this is the presentation I did today. And then this is that matrix that I was talking about. And I just click on show document. And so here's that matrix for cognitive demand by subject area. Okay. And so I'm continuing to add to this pathway. So next week, there'll be some more pieces related to assessment practices, and my presentation on assessment practices will be here. So this gives you an idea of what already exists, and what it would look like as as an educator creating these pathways. Additionally, we have go back to, oops. Okay, so again, back to my courses here. Here are my classes. So this is the one that everyone should join. And then over the past few weeks, we've had this group break into a few different subgroups. And so this is more focused for people that are delivering, working at the district level and school level, and maybe providing PD to teachers, other educators. This is for people that are looking to provide STEM content to students. And this one is for kind of everybody else who want to work with the people who are working with the community, college and career readiness, mentorship, that sort of thing. So in my group, one thing that we've been doing is in the discussion board, I've been asking people to add research and articles that have to do with effective practices for online learning. And so I've taken these pieces that people have posted in the discussion board, and I've put it into the course. So, or I thought I had, maybe I haven't yet. Anyway, so I'll be adding, oh yeah, I didn't add content yet. So I will be adding those to this course, and then everyone who's in this course can see links to those articles about effective online learning. So any thoughts or questions on that? Does that make sense?
And it's cool too, because let's say you've also created your own course, like you're a teacher because you're ready to start to do this on your own in some capacity. You can take what we've got in here, the pathways, and you can copy those and remix them if you want into your own course. So the great thing about kind of the mode that we're taking in terms of everyone adding something is that we have access to some pre-made content and pathways to get you started. So you copy those pathways, and then from copying them, you are then the owner of it, and you can remix that and add that to your own course if you've already established your own course on here. So good way not to have to start from scratch and kind of rebuild on something that's already embedded into our couple of different PLC courses.
So what we're asking for next week is that you create a pathway under your educator account. And then what we can do is you can share those with us, and then we can add those to these courses, or we can all have access to them. And like Keisha said, then you can copy those and share them in whatever method makes sense to you, if you have your own course or your own cluster. So yeah. Any other questions popping up, Jeremy, or are we?
I think that we have touched on everything. I mean, there's some questions that have popped up that we've sort of answered in the course of the conversation. I don't believe so. I mean, I think we're in a fairly good place. Folks, if there's something specific that you'd like to answer quickly, Jessica just posted a link about some deeper dive seminars that are available this summer, if that's something that you're interested in. But really the next step, the marching orders that we've got are to put something together. It would be amazing if that was a complete pathway, but don't let a complete pathway, that idea, be a barrier to getting something down. As we've kind of talked about before, and Keisha and Julie and I were talking about earlier, if there are components that you're stuck in that are making it difficult to complete a pathway, just getting some placeholders in there, sharing them with this entire group, and allowing everybody to kind of chime in with resources that they're aware of and that they feel are high quality, might be a good way for you to get that pathway completed. So I know I'm excited to take a peek at these, even in their beginning stage next week. I know Keisha and Julie and Jessica are as well. If you have any other questions, please make sure to email. What are we emailing, Keisha? We're doing info at STEM Ecosystems.
Yeah.
Info at STEMecosystems.org is kind of a general email that you can send those questions to. Put something in the subject line about this being about LabXchange.
Also take the survey. I posted the link again. There's an area, there is a box for you to have general comments in there too. And I'll be looking at the survey and creating some summaries of it over the next week too, because we'll send it out again next Thursday. So if I see something in your responses over the next week, we can hit on it next Thursday. So if you have time, please take the survey so we can get you guys what you need.
Perfect. So thank you all. We're looking forward to this last session and seeing what you have to share. Please make sure to email info at STEMecosystems.org if you have any additional questions. Dig in there, get started. Don't worry about it not being perfect. Get some content in there, but again, it is okay to say, need a video that shows this, need an activity that does this, because we might be able to help fill in those gaps. And we're looking forward to seeing all of those next week. So thank you all, and we'll see you soon.